Doesn't even fit. Hey guys, I'm Tom the Tech Chap, and Apple just had a massive Mac event, a Big Mac event, if you will, where they unveiled the new M1 Pro and M1 Max chips, which will be powering the brand new MacBook Pro 14 and 16. So the rumors were pretty spot on, but it really does seem like Apple have actually listened to what we want. They've brought back the MagSafe, they've got rid of the touch bar, they've given us the more powerful M1 Pro and M1 Max chips. We've got the mini LED high refresh screen, basically stolen from the iPad. They've even added more ports, including an HDMI, full-size SD card reader, alongside Thunderbolt 4 and that new MagSafe 3 charger connector. So it really feels like they've gone back to basics, everything we used to know and love about MacBooks, but then supercharge them for 2021. As you would expect, of course, these are eye-wateringly expensive laptops, but for the enthusiasts and the professionals, this is what we've been asking for. No more gimmicks and touch bars, no more limitation of ports where everyone has to bring adapters with them, and if you forget it, then you're screwed, which I think we've all been there with MacBooks in the last few years. So regardless of the 3, 4, 10 times performance boost and whatever numbers they're throwing out with the new M1 chips, it's actually the usability, those quality of life improvements with the mini LED screen, the ports, lack of touch bar, that really I think are going to make these pretty much the best laptops you can buy, if you can afford them. Okay, so let's break this down a little bit. Let's see what the options are and some of the specs, and maybe see if you are tempted to buy one of them, which one you should go for. So helpfully, Apple have laid out a bit of a comparison so you can quickly see the difference between the models. Although what I would recommend is if you click on compare and then actually select the models that you're interested in. So if you put the Pro 16, we've got the Pro 14, and let's keep the Pro 13 in as well, which is £600 cheaper than the entry-level 14-inch. So that's definitely still worth considering. So straight away, the two new models are bigger. We've got a 14.2 and 16.2-inch screen respectively. They both share the same display, so it's not like the iPad 11 and 12.9 where only the bigger one gets the mini LED. They are the same, so the resolution's a little bit different, but to make sure they're just as sharp as each other. Surprisingly, both the 14 and 16 can be spec'd with the M1 Pro and the Max. I had kind of expected that the Max might be limited to the big one, but no, you get both options on both, which is great. And so we're looking at up to 10 core CPUs, 32 core GPUs, now up to 64 gigs of unified memory, which is essentially RAM, but as you can see, that is a big step up over the 16 gigs, which we maxed out with the 13-inch Pro. Also up to 8 terabytes of storage, which Apple didn't even mention in the conference, but that's 4 times more than the previous model. Although it seems the only area the current MacBook Pro 13 does keep up is in terms of battery life, but the compromise is you still have to deal with that touch bar. So these new M1 Pro and Max chips are really interesting because they are just scaled up versions of the M1. It's still the same 5nm architecture, but it's significantly faster pretty much across the board. And not only in terms of more cores and raw performance, but we're also now getting a dedicated media engine, which is designed to be a much more efficient way of processing, decoding, and encoding video. Scrolling down to memory, and as you can see, we've got the 3 options here, and actually the 64 gig is exclusive to the Max, although both models have the same storage options, all the way up to that ridiculous 8 terabytes. In terms of design, we now of course have this notch and the much thinner bezels, and also the touch bar is gone, but we're looking at 1.6 and 2.1 kilograms respectively for the new laptops. It's not exactly a headline feature, but I must admit one of the big upgrades I'm really looking forward to using is this new FaceTime HD camera. It's 1080p up from 720p before, and along with the ISP and the M1 Pro and Max chips, video quality should be a lot better. Both new laptops also get a 6-speaker sound system, which itself is a big upgrade over what was already probably the best sounding laptop you could get, the previous MacBook Pro 16, with higher fidelity speakers and much more bass. Interestingly, both the new 14 and the 16 have the exact same range of ports, which is great. You're not sort of limiting yourself by going for the smaller 14. But one area the Pro 16 does stand out is with battery life, which as you can see, it does last quite a bit longer than the 14-inch. With its huge 100 watt-hour lithium polymer battery, so that's the easy bit, because when you then go to spec your shiny new MacBook Pro, there's about a billion options, and it can get a bit complicated. Let's start with the 14-inch, which costs £1,900 or $2,000. And if we go into the advanced spec, you can see we've got 5 different options for the processor, which get progressively more eye-wateringly expensive, maxing out with the M1 Max. If we start with the M1 Pro, the base one, we can still get 32 gigs of memory. I reckon 1 terabyte is probably a better option. And also, if you want, I thought this was quite interesting, you can actually pay for the higher wattage power adapter, so presumably slightly faster charging. Although if you do go for one of the Maxes, that's the power adapter you get by default. So right now we are in a kind of wait and see place for how these different SKUs and spec combinations will compare to each other. Is it going to be worth going for the higher core CPUs and GPUs? And sort of what's the best middle ground? That's something that we're going to have to test. And I'll be making videos on myself, so stay tuned for that. But right now, they're all going to be ridiculously powerful. So probably for most people, I reckon that base M1 Pro is probably going to be good enough. Then I would pay the extra for the 32 gigs of memory and then probably a 1 terabyte SSD. But then let's look at the 16, which starts at £2,400 or $2,500. And as you can see, we actually have 3 SKUs for this right up front. I should say that both new MacBook Pros come in the usual silver and space gray. Although I think for me, I reckon space gray might be the one I go for. So jumping into the base 16-inch Pro, we actually only have 3 options this time, 1 Pro and 2 Maxes. And again, if you want that 64 gigs, then you do need to go for a Max core. And if we just max everything out, because this is always fun, it turns out the most expensive new MacBook Pro 16 is about £5,900 or about $6,000, which is not as crazy expensive maybe as I expected, given you have 8 terabytes of very fast storage, maybe just the one. So to sum up, we've got the 2 new MacBook Pros, including that brand new 14-inch version. We've got that slight redesign with the thinner bezels and the notch. We've got that high refresh mini LED screen, the M1 Pro, M1 Max, better speakers, better 1080p FaceTime camera, the extra ports, much better battery life, and no touch bar. So that's a pretty big upgrade. But one thing's for sure, we are now going to see a billion copycat laptops with notches in the next few months. It's not a bad thing, especially as it seems that the menu bar actually uses that space either side of the notch, and if you're in dark mode, you might not even see it very often. So first impressions, I am pretty blown away by how good these seem. As I say, we're gonna have to wait and see how the different chips compare. I'm really curious to see how much faster it is than this outgoing Intel MacBook Pro 16, because I reckon it's gonna be a lot faster and also a lot quieter and also a lot longer battery. So make sure you have hit that subscribe button, because I'll be doing a ton of reviews and comparisons, trust me. But what do you reckon? Have you bought one already? Are you tempted? Or is it all just over the top and Apple hype and really it's not that interesting? Let me know what you make of the new MacBook Pros in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching, guys, and I'll see you next time right here on the Tech Chat.